I don't believe in ghosts, or I didn't. I'm a structural engineer. I believe in load-bearing walls, soil density, and settling foundations. When my wife Elena and I bought the house on Blackwood Lane, I had an explanation for every creak. It's just the Victorian timber expanding, I'd tell her. Old houses breathe, Elle, but houses aren't supposed to hold their breath. It started 3 weeks after we moved in. We had just set up the nursery for our daughter, Maya. We used one of those high-end baby monitors, the kind that connects to your phone with crystal clear audio and night vision. The first night, the monitor triggered an alert at 3:14 a.m. I opened the app. The room was still. Maya was sound asleep. But the audio, there was a sound like wet sand being dragged over glass. I assumed it was radio interference, but then a voice broke through the static. It wasn't a scream. It was a whisper so low it felt like it was vibrating inside my own ear canal. Count the ribs. I froze. My wife was snoring beside me. I looked at the screen. Maya shifted in her sleep, and for a split second, the night vision flared. Beside her crib, there was a distortion, like heat rising off asphalt. Then it vanished. The observation. The next day, I checked the floorboards. No pests, no damp. But I noticed something odd. In the nursery, the air felt dense, like walking through waist-deep water. I decided to stay up. I sat in the kitchen with the monitor on the table. At exactly 3:14 a.m., the screen flickered to life. Maya wasn't sleeping this time. She was sitting up, staring at the corner of the room. Her eyes weren't drowsy. They were wide, tracking something moving along the ceiling. Then she started laughing. It wasn't her usual giggle. It was a rhythmic, breathless sound. She raised her tiny hand and pointed at the empty space above her crib. The monitor's audio spiked into a deafening screech of static, and a man's voice, clear as if he were sitting right next to me, said, "She has 24, I checked." The geometry of the house. I ran upstairs, heart slamming against my ribs. I burst into the room. Maya was crying now, terrified by my sudden entrance. The room was freezing, so cold my breath misted in the air. I grabbed her and looked at the corner she had been pointing at. There was nothing there but a faint, greasy smudge on the wallpaper. I stayed in the nursery for the rest of the night. I started measuring things. Call it a nervous tic, but I needed math to make sense of the fear. I measured the walls. Exterior width, 12 meters. Interior width, sum of rooms, 11.2 meters. There was a 0.8 meter gap unaccounted for between the nursery and our master bedroom. A dead space with no door, no window, and no reason to exist. I didn't tell Elena. I didn't want to sound insane. But the next day while she was out, I took a sledgehammer to the drywall at the nursery closet. Behind the plaster wasn't just empty space. There was a narrow vertical cavity. It was lined with old yellowed newspaper from 1922. And hanging from a single rusted nail was a hand-carved wooden rattle. But it wasn't a rattle for a baby. It was carved in the shape of a human rib cage. When I shook it, it didn't jingle. It made that same sound from the monitor. I felt a presence behind me. I spun around. The nursery door was closing, slowly, deliberately. I lunged for it, but it clicked shut. I grabbed the handle. It wouldn't budge, not because it was locked, but because something on the other side was holding the knob still. Then through the wood of the door, I heard it, a soft, wet shuffling. And then the voice of my wife. "Mark, Let me in. I want to see what you found." My blood ran cold. Elena wasn't home. I had seen her drive away 10 minutes ago. "Elena," I whispered, my hand trembling on the knob. "Open the door, Mark. The baby's hungry. We need to count again." The voice shifted. It started as Elena's, but by the end of the sentence, it had distorted into that guttural, static-filled rasp. I didn't open the door. I kicked through the nursery window and climbed out onto the porch roof with the wooden rattle still in my hand. I drove to my mother-in-law's house and waited for Elena. When she arrived, she was fine. She had no idea what I was talking about. We moved out the next week. I didn't care about the deposit. I didn't care about the settling foundations. I still have that baby monitor, though. It's sitting in a box in our new apartment. Sometimes in the middle of the night, even when it's unplugged, the screen glows. It shows a night vision feed of a room I don't recognize. A dark, narrow space lined with yellowed newspapers. And in the center of the frame, a pair of long, pale hands reach out, counting. 1, 2, 3. I'm a professional house flipper. I've seen black mold, rotted foundations, and walls filled with dead rats. You get used to the gross factor, but you never get used to a house that feels like it's watching you. In 2024, I bought a colonial house in Pennsylvania for half its market price. The previous owner, an elderly map maker named Arthur Vance, had died of natural causes, but the neighbors whispered he'd simply stopped eating. When I first walked in, the air was dry and smelled like copper. The basement was the worst part. It was filled with hundreds of mirrors, all leaned against each other, facing a single wooden chair bolted to the floor. I started the renovation on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, the house started to glitch. I was stripping wallpaper in the hallway and used a small hand mirror to check behind a pipe. When I caught my reflection, I blinked. In the mirror, I didn't. For a microsecond, the me in the glass kept his eyes wide open, staring back with pure, unadulterated hatred. I dropped the mirror. It shattered. "Just exhaustion," I muttered. But when I looked at the shards on the floor, each piece showed me a different expression. One was laughing. One was screaming. One was just waiting. I checked the police report on Arthur Vance that night. He wasn't just found dead. He was found with his eyelids taped to his forehead with industrial adhesive. He hadn't slept in weeks. I went back to the basement and found Vance's journal hidden under the floorboards. The entries weren't about maps of countries. They were maps of the space between seconds. October 12th. They live in the glass. They are 1% different from us. They wait for the moment you look away. If you don't look back fast enough, they gain a centimeter of ground. November 4th. I caught one today in the hallway. It smiled and I felt a new sharp tooth grow in my own gums. It's taking me piece by piece. I felt my mouth. My back molar felt like a needle. I ran to the bathroom and stared at the mirror. Nothing happened for 10 minutes. Then a faint fog appeared on the inside of the glass. It formed one word: blink. I tried to leave, but the front door wouldn't budge. The wood felt like it had fused with the frame. I looked at the windows. They weren't glass anymore. They were mirrors reflecting the interior of the house back at me. I was trapped in a box of reflections. Everywhere I turned, I saw myself. Dozens of me. Suddenly, one of my reflections, the one in the dining room, started to walk away from the glass. It didn't follow my movements. It stepped out of the frame and disappeared into the shadows of the kitchen. I felt a cold breeze on the back of my neck. I realized then, if the reflection leaves the mirror, where does it go? I retreated to the basement chair, the only place where I could see every angle. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but the screen only reflected my face. Then the reflection on the phone spoke. Its voice sounded like grinding stones. Arthur lasted 3 years. You won't last the night. You blink too much. I felt a sharp tug on my sleeve. I looked down. My own shadow was reaching up, its fingers sinking into my skin like smoke. It was trying to pull me into the floor. I've been here for 3 days now. I used industrial duct tape to keep my eyes open, just like Arthur. My vision is a red, stinging blur, but I can't stop. They are standing at the edge of every reflective surface now. My kitchen appliances, the polished floor, even the back of a spoon. There are hundreds of me. They are practicing. They are learning how to walk like me, how to breathe like me, how to lie like me. Last night, the main one stood in the basement door. It looked exactly like me, but its eyes were silver spheres. It whispered, "Go to sleep, Mark. I'll finish the renovation. I'll go home to your wife. She won't even notice the 1% difference. In fact, she might even like me better." If you ever find this house and see a man working on it, a man whose smile is a bit too wide and whose eyes never seem to wander, don't go inside. And for God's sake, whatever you do, don't blink.